All right, joined now by Natalie Esquire of NBC Sports. She's our Golden State correspondent for the Alley Oop. Really appreciate you stopping by for a second time. Uh, Tough year for the Warriors. I remember the last time we did this, it was obviously about 6 weeks ago, and Draymond hadn't been suspended yet. Things hadn't been getting weird with the coaching staff. There's a lot of stuff. Jonathan Kuminga had a trade demand, or basically saying, yeah, Steve Kerr's not the guy for us anymore, not the guy for me anymore. They're down to 12 in the West right now, which is just not something I ever thought I would be able to say for the Warriors. Nat, what's going on? What's happening with the Warriors right now?
I mean, I think because people are like outside of the team. I mean, I know fans are frustrated, so I don't want to understate that, but I'm not having like this reaction everyone else is. I
Hmm,
mean, it was just a couple of years ago, actually the first year of the play-in when the Warriors did miss the playoffs, but like they were also out of the play-in, below in the standings, and then they just came back, went on a run, and they actually finished, I believe, eighth. That was with Steph missing several games because he had a tailbone industry injury, and you know, like to me with the play-in being there, it's not like I don't really so much pay attention to the numbers. Like if they were 12th, but they were like 8 spots out of the 10th place, then I'd be like, ooh, but like they're
sure.
like it's like there's no team that's right now. I mean, even what I think sixth place, it's only like 5 games or 6 games behind. So I right now I'm just not at the point where I'm like, oh my God, they won't even make the playoffs. But for a team like the Warriors, it's championship or bust. So it's like, do I think they're gonna win a championship this year? Probably not. Um, so but I'm not like having this like, oh my God, they're in 12th place and the reaction that everyone's having for them and the Lakers being where they are, it's like, bro, I don't know what to tell you. Like
Yeah,
I'm not it's sort of hard for me to have like that kind of reaction, but I think just because the expectations for Warriors, no matter what, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's on the team. It doesn't matter that they're out, right? Like Draymond has missed most of their games this season. They're not going to be as good without him. And yet, that very fact that people know, I'm not excusing Draymond. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, the result is Draymond has not played. And
sure.
yet, every time they lose a game, people act like the sky is falling, like their best defender is missing. Like, yeah, their defense isn't going to be as good. Like, that's just common sense. So
Yeah,
I don't
fair.
really get the reactions, but it's the Warriors, so people are going to react like that. Just it's what comes with the territory at this point.
Yeah, I mean, when you're a dynasty for a decade, it's gonna be a little bit weird when you kind of reach the tail end of that, and I think everybody's kind of coming to grips with that as a reality. And Draymond's one of those guys that's
I
probably
don't accept that as a reality. I think that's easy to say, but you guys or people have been saying that for now 2, 3 years. They said that in 2022 when they won. The only way that you can really say to me a Warriors dynasty is over is like when Steph Curry doesn't have it anymore. Because like even if they don't win this year, but they come back and they win next year, is the dynasty over? Has it continued? Like how do you evaluate that, right? Like the Spurs, right? They never even won back-to-back years, but people consider them a dynasty and they had years in between their wins. So I still think it's premature to say that because of
maybe.
the level that Steph Curry's still playing at. Yeah, he's had like a rough stretch, but again, it's always again with Steph, it's like, oh my gosh, he shot badly for 8 games. He literally does that every season. Every
Yeah,
season.
that's
It's
fair.
not like, so at the end of the day, Steph Curry's still playing at a wherever you want to rank him, top 5 level still. So, or has the ability to still be a top 5 player. So as long as that still exists, then I don't really think you can say like it's ending or whatever. I just it to me it's all
Right.
based on how much time Steph Curry has left. It's also based on what kind of moves they do to retool the team. And since no one knows that, we can't really say. I know people hope that. I know they hope there's a time that you don't even have to consider the Warriors, but I still think it's a little premature to say that right
No,
now.
I think it's understandable. When I think of the Warriors and when I think of the dynasty, I think of Steph, Clay, and Dre together. And we haven't seen them together for a while, partially due to Draymond's own fault. But Clay has also not been the same, and he's had these moments where he's bounced back and looked a little bit better, but he's just not the defender that he was and things like that. And just the injuries have clearly taken a little bit of a toll here. But you have to go through a metamorphosis. You have to go through a little bit of a change with a team like this. And Draymond's been on the sidelines for a lot of it. So what can you tell us? Like, he's been away from the team. Now he's back. I've seen him on the sidelines a little bit. What like is he coming back soon? What's the latest on this?
Yeah, he's expected to come back either for their next game against Memphis, or if not Memphis, then the game after that versus Utah. So
Hmm.
during this road trip, so we'll see. And I think, I mean, there's been a lot of promising signs with the Warriors just after they had like a few, devastating losses, or embarrassing maybe is a better term than devastating, but they had some pretty embarrassing losses, got booed at home. I don't think at any time during this era I can recall the Warriors being booed at home.
Yeah.
But they deserved it. I'm not like complaining about it. Just, they were not playing inspired basketball. And so they've looked better since then. The defense has looked better. Um there's a lot of things that have looked better, so I know for people who are not following the team closely, they're just going to look at a result at the end of the day. But I mean, they played the Bucks last night, and the Bucks needed every bit of their big three to win that game, even though Steph was out the game, Draymond Green was out the game, Chris Paul
Sure.
was out the game, Moses Moody was out the game, Gary Payton II was out the game, and they still needed like Giannis to go into like be Giannis. Chris um Chris Middleton had an amazing shooting night, like, but their big three had to show up in that game to fend off to fend off Brandon Pajimski and Jonathan Kaminga. So,
Love it.
and in general, I mean, I know Denver Nuggets fans are very happy about the way the last game went, but like the Warriors sold that game. Like, I'm not trying to disrespect them,
They
but they
did.
did. They should have
Oh
won.
yeah.
That was their game to win. And they did that missing players. And every game with the Nuggets has been close. None of these games have been games where the Nuggets have just like owned them or anything like that. They beat the Celtics. The Warriors play with all the teams. And they've been doing that with a lot of dysfunction in their team this year. So the question is always to me whether they can turn it around. And I don't know. I think it's a lot to have to turn around. I think they do need to make some trades, but I also just think, you mentioned earlier in your opening about Jonathan Kaminga and what he said about Steve Kerr. And even though they've had a
Right.
talk, I don't believe that that's not still there, even if it's sort of like settled right now. You had another game last night where it was clear to me and many people that Jonathan Kaminga should have been on the floor and he was not. And he's not the only one, but like, if they were going to win the game, I think it was blown by Jonathan Kaminga not coming in until like the last minute of the game, So
Hmm.
again, Steve Kerr choosing Andrew Wiggins over him. So even though they said, oh, we hashed it out, we talked and blah, 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 I think that's still there. And he's not the only young player who's not happy. So there are some things with the roster construction and on this team. So I just don't know if the Warriors can overcome everything. It feels like a lot to have to overcome in a season, but in terms of their talent and ability, like the record doesn't match it, but I know when I watch the games, they're in every game. These teams are not like manhandling them. Like I said, they had a few embarrassing losses, but it wasn't even to the top teams. It was to the renewed Raptors, right? It was to the
Sure.
Miami Heat. It was not to like the teams who everyone's like, oh, these are the teams. Like all those teams, they're either winning or close with their like 1 point victories, last possession victories. So
Right.
I just don't think people should be so quick to step on the Warriors' grave yet.
That's fair. It's one of those things where you have championship DNA, and if you like, you know it when you have it, and like you can only get it through experience, frankly. And they have as much experience being in this situation as they possibly can. Now, this particular year is a little bit different, but I do think that you still get all your guys back, you still get everybody healthy, and we talk about internal solutions here. So, you think that playing Kuminga and Moody would change some things in a positive way? Just making sure that those guys play, making sure that they get like because I think Steve's had some troubles playing some young guys, and he's
I
Continually
think
going
like
back to Andrew
multiple young
Wiggins.
players would make a difference on this team. I don't think Steve Kerr is going to change. So I just feel like you got to save him from himself. You got to like take away some of his options. And I love Andrew Wiggins. I'm one of the few people who still go to bat for him. But I don't think there's any circumstance in which Jonathan Kuminga is not the better player than him right now for the team. And even though Jonathan Kuminga just went back to the bench, he still played well. Whereas when Andrew was on the bench, he did not play. He's played better now that he's back in the starting lineup, but his play hasn't been better than Jonathan Kuminga's, right? And so Jonathan Kuminga has been on a roll. Trace Jackson Davis has been great for us this year. Kevon Looney has not. He shouldn't be playing. And yet they're still like forcing Kevon Looney minutes. And some of that, their hands are tied because of Draymond. But in general, last night, it was Kevon Looney out there instead of Trace. It was Andrew Wiggins out there instead of Jonathan Kuminga until like the very last minute,
Sure.
And you have Brandon Podziemski, who's been great, but like in the last few games before last night in front of his hometown audience, he had not been great. And Moses Moody, like to me would have been a big difference. And Kerr really, he did play him once like the Chris Paul injury occurred, but still had like an unwillingness to play him, where he's at least giving you better length on the wing, better defense. So yes, do I think those players can help? Yes. Do I think that Steve Kerr is going to get rid of his aversion to leaning into vets more than the young guys? No. And so I think the roster has to be shaken up a little bit. I think they have to make some changes. And
Okay,
they are.
so
I mean,
who are
they're
these?
not, the Warriors are never in trade discussions, and they are this year.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first year where you really have to look externally and be like, hey, we don't know if we've got it this particular season with this particular mix. So I can understand looking around and being like, hey, there's some good players out there. So who are the players that they're pining after? Who are the players that the fan base wants? Who are the players that might be readily available?
I mean, the fan base wants Lauri Markkanen. I think every fan base does, but I don't think
Sure.
he's a real option or going to become available. So I think the highest profile name linked to the Warriors right now is Pascal Siakam. And the Warriors can get him. It's just a matter of what they're willing to part with. And so, but the Toronto doesn't have the kind of, leverage in this deal. So
Sure.
I think unless some other team just like right now says they're going to trade him, the biggest leverage really is going to be what another team is offering, but also Pascal, because like we heard about the Kings being in the mix and then heard very quickly right after they were out of it because he told them that he will not sign there. And I
Sure.
think it's notable that for the Mavericks, who've also been linked to him, for the Warriors and some of the other teams, you haven't heard that same thing. You haven't heard they're out the mix. I think there's a very strong chance that where Pascal gets traded to, he will sign with. And I think he's just trying to control where he goes and not give Toronto the ability to control that. So I personally would love like a Chris Paul, Moses Moody, a pick like deal, like as Moses Moody as the centerpiece for Pascal versus Jonathan Kuminga. I just think he's playing too well right now. I think he's your best trade asset. And I think you hold on to that for a little bit to see what happens in the off season. And if you really feel like you got to move Jonathan Kuminga, I would do it then. I wouldn't do it right now. So
Okay.
I certainly wouldn't do it without some assurance that Pascal is going to sign with you. So, but I'd be comfortable without knowing whether or not Pascal's going to sign with allowing Moses Moody to be the centerpiece. And it's not because I don't think Moses Moody is a good player. It's because you're not playing him anyway. So if you're not playing him anyway, you might as well just trade him. And arguably, he's actually a better fit on that team than Jonathan Kuminga anyway, because they just got RJ. So
Sure.
we'll see, but there is a path to them getting Pascal. In terms of other players, it's been the names that are out there for everybody, Zach LaVine, Dejounte Murray. Personally, I don't really love either of those two, but the only other name that really stands out to me that would interest me is Jarrett Allen. who I think also would be a really good upgrade for the Warriors. Not as good of an upgrade as Pascal. There's a path, I think, to them getting both, but I don't think the Warriors want to pay the money for both. So I just don't see that happening.
Right.
But you never know. But yeah, I mean, Jarrett Allen, like you get another vertical threat, you get an athletic big, you get length. And you would now have like an athletic big who can start for you as well as one coming off your bench in Trace Jackson Davis, you know? Just someone who can finish plays, unlike Kevon Looney, it would just be tremendous. And also, Jarrett Allen's a really good passer. It's like very underrated skill about him. So that would really work and fit in a Warrior system. And I know with like someone like, wait, did I just say Jarrett Allen or Pascal?
Jarrett Allen.
Jarrett Allen, yeah. With Pascal, I think there's a lot of concern about whether he would be redundant with Draymond Green. I don't think he will be. But again, you're adding someone, if you do go for Pascal Siakam, one who can self-create, can get to the rim, who will definitely make you pay for doubling the Splash Brothers or selling out on them. Because right now, teams are like, we don't have to defend anyone else except the Splash Brothers on the court. That's it.
Sure.
We don't have to defend anyone else. And the other guys are not making them pay for that. Pascal can make you pay for that. They won't do it. He will be defended. And I know there's been some concern about his 3-point shooting, but anytime someone plays next to Stephen Clay, their efficiency, their numbers always improve. But even if they didn't, he's a lethal mid-range shooter. Like I said, he gives you a rim attack. He can defend, which is badly needed on this team. And he gives you a lot of length. I mean, I just don't see anyone who's concerned about Pascal. I don't get, but either one of those two pieces, I think would be great additions to the Warriors. So we have to watch and see.
Yeah, no, I think one of the concerns I'd have if the particular deal that you built where you're keeping Andrew Wiggins, you're keeping Jonathan Kuminga, you're keeping Draymond Green, there's a lot of like condensed shooting with that
Wouldn't
particular.
be keeping Wiggins in a
Okay.
Jarrett Allen. I don't think in a Jarrett Allen trade, but
keeping for Pascal
would be
specifically.
keeping him in a Pascal trade most likely.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. I mean, the talent is clearly there, and if Toronto was willing to get a little bit creative with a deal like that and say, hey, we want to build around a guy like Moses Moody, then it'd be music to Golden State Warriors' ears. Like that.
Well, I
that
don't
would
think
be
they need to build around Moses Moody though. They're building around Scotty, right?
Yeah.
But it's about now getting the right pieces for him, and you just traded for RJ, so RJ and Kuminga are at more conflict than a Moses Moody. Moses Moody fits the team better, right?
Yeah.
So that's really what it is. So it's who would be the centerpiece of the deal. They want back players. They want young players. So it's just whether you think Moody's a good enough asset. But again, Toronto doesn't have the leverage here. Pascal's an expiring contract. So you can say no. And unless you get a better offer from another team, right, then you risk losing him for nothing in free agency like Fred VanVleet. So their leverage to really like be difficult here. It's either you get something or you get nothing. And the thing is, like, for some of these teams who have cap space, they can also say, forget it. We're just going to wait till free agency because we can take our shot at Pascal then. So the Toronto doesn't have much leverage here. It's just a matter of, do they get another deal that they prefer over what the Warriors may offer? And then are the Warriors willing to part with Jonathan Kuminga? Because if Jonathan Kuminga was in it, I'm sure that they would take it. The Warriors just don't know if they want to give up Jonathan Kuminga for a rental right now in Pascal. I think the only way they would do that is with some assurances. So that's really the difference between the two.
Seems completely fair. And we just saw a team that went from kind of sub 500, floundering a little bit in the like outside of the playoff picture in the Lakers, to then turning it around and getting to the Western Conference Finals and making a significant run. So this can happen. It's not like just because the Warriors are in this situation right now doesn't mean that this is where they're going to finish. And I do think
two teams do it without even making trades. The Miami Heat did it last year as well. And the Warriors, like I said, they didn't end up making the playoffs, but they did it in 2021 they were like below 500, right, with the All-Star break, and then they came back and they finished eighth. So these things are not impossible at all if you understand the reason why a team was losing. If the Warriors were fully healthy and they didn't have all these players in and out and they were like this, that's a different story. But the way everyone assesses and talks about the Warriors is this: they've been playing healthy all season, they've had their full complement of players, and they just suck, which is a disingenuous story. So when and if they do turn around, they play better, that's not surprising to me, and then people are like, oh, well, no one expected this. Well, actually, if you're watching Warriors games night in and night out, you would expect it. And that's the difference between talking to people who actually cover and watch the team versus people who are like on the outside. And I'm not mad at that, because that would be the similar analysis that I would give to a team if I'm not watching them day in and day out, which is why when I want to talk about other teams, I have people who cover those teams on, because people kind of just say things. They're just like, oh, let me look at the results. The Warriors last 4 of their last 5. That's not telling me much, So, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Nat, it's the entire premise of this show. It's why I bring on local people from their individual markets to talk about their teams, because then you get the source pretty strong. So I'm really excited about this. We'll see where they go from here, but I'm very excited to track it with you. She is Natalie Esquire of NBC Sports, covering the Golden State Warriors for us here at the Alley Oop. Let's chat again in 6 weeks. All right, Nat?
So thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, Ryan.